Hey, what's up, everybody? This is GameLogIQ from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast. This is episode number 333 for the 7th of April, 2024. Here with me, as always, is my stalwart partner in crime, Mr. Tao Master. How you doing, Tao?
I thought you were going to call me Posture 99 there for a second. I'm doing well. Also, hello, Hero Down Under. He just joined the chat.
All right, very cool, very cool. Well, without much further ado, let's get to it. We'll go straight into segment one. I don't have any new games to cover this week. It will all be Tao. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off, Tao, with your continuing play of the only baseball game in town, pretty much.
Yeah. So I just want to comment here that this is a topsy-turvy world where you have no new games the last few weeks, and I've had a bunch actually the last few months. It's kind of surprising. But just a quick update on MLB The Show. I have quickly this year gotten to AAA, so that's actually kind of exciting for me, since it took me, I think, maybe midsummer last year before I even hit AAA. So maybe I'll hit the big leagues come this summer, which I haven't done yet, going through the road to the show. So just wanted to give that quick update. Been playing that through xCloud on my Xbox Series X, my PC, and the Steam Deck. So I've kind of jumping around between systems there. Also, another game that I've been playing between, I think, just my Xbox Series X and the Steam Deck is Lego 2K Drive, which new to me, obviously not a new game. It came out, I believe, last year. So it's the Lego kind of racing game, open worldish, I guess, open areas. So there's different areas of the kind of larger map that you can go to, but they're kind of not connected. So you kind of just like teleport to them, or fast travel, I should say, between the areas. But just you can drive around the city. There's people that have some quests and stuff for you to do, and I think DB had played this back when it first came out. I don't know if he's been playing it off and on or not since then, but just kind of drive around. You can drive wherever you want, and within the city, obviously, you have little story missions you can go to if you want to. There's other little, like I said, quests and missions you can do, like driving stuff. There was one where I was like, you had to hit these giant golf balls into a golf hole. So there's just kind of different wacky things you can do in the game. So it's pretty interesting. There is a customization where you can kind of customize your own vehicle. I haven't tried that out yet. I just started playing it like last couple days. It just came out on Game Pass, I think last week, maybe the week before. So just trying it out. It's pretty good. The driving, I don't know, I gotta ask DB about this, but the driving just seems kind of weird to me. And it's not like it's laggy or anything like that. Like some people might think it's like xCloud, because I'm playing through the servers and stuff, through the cloud, but it actually seems a little bit more sensitive when I'm driving. It just regular turning, and then especially when you're trying to do the drift, there's like a dedicated drift button that you press when you want to drift. So I don't know, it just seems like it's super sensitive. Like you really gotta, at least for the drifting, you kind of have to feather the drift instead of just like holding it down and drift like you would maybe in Mario or what was the other game? Rocket Racing, through Fortnite and stuff like that. So it's a little weird, but I'll have to ask him about that. And I didn't mess with any of the settings or anything, so it's on default settings. So I'll have to see about that. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I can't talk either today. I'm enjoying it so far. It's a very, very pretty game. Like, I know it's a Lego game, but if you go back and look at like the original, like say like Star Wars and those kind of games like back in the day, and then you look at something today, it's like, wow, they're really, you didn't think they could do much with improve a Lego game, but it actually does look really nice. So you get all the bells and whistles and stuff, of course, with modern gaming consoles and PCs and stuff. So, but yeah, it looks really nice, and really other than the driving, which I have to just get used to, maybe just because every game has to do driving different, so it might just be something I have to get used to. But it's pretty enjoyable game so far. And going back to the show real quick, and I don't, maybe you might be able to answer this question too, because I'd never seen this before in any of the other shows, but there was kind of like a quick time event that had happened to me. I forgot to mention this before. So when I was like diving for a catch, I do center field right now, my position. and all of a sudden it like turned into a quick time event where there's like a circle that comes up, and I didn't know what was going on, so I was just like hitting all the buttons like mad. But then all of a sudden the X button popped up, which I'm assuming, well, an X popped up. I'm assuming I had hit the X button, but since I was like hitting everything, I hit the wrong button and I missed the catch. But I'd never seen those in previous games. I don't know if you ever remember that GameLogIQ, if the other games you've played, the other MLB, the shows you've played.
No, I haven't seen that particular mechanic come up, but I mean, MLB The Show has so many buttons and whistles and dials in it that I'm hard pressed to call it that's definitively like never been in there before.
Yeah,
but no, I don't remember it ever coming up.
Okay, and I'm just using I think it's just you press the button to catch stuff and throw stuff, so it's like I'm using the same control schemes that I've used in the past. So it was just interesting that I just never saw that before. It just freaked me out. I thought my game froze for a second there because everything kind of freezes. You kind of go into slow motion, but it was like weird. But yeah, those are the two games I've been mostly playing these past couple of weeks, and I'll talk about one other one later in the round robin.
All right, very cool. Well, let's go ahead and proceed on to the news segment. First up in the rundown, we have a story over at GameSpot. Xbox Showcase coming June 9th with new Call of Duty and more report. GameSpot so we won't read the liability statement. According to a new report, Microsoft will host a big summertime event this June featuring a number of game announcements and release date events, among other things. The Verge reported that Microsoft is in the midst of planning its previously announced summer showcase. Which the site said will take place on Sunday, June 9th. The event will reportedly include the announcement of the next Gears of War game. So, a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned that the Jeff Keighley show, the Summer Game Fest, had announced when it was going to do its keynote and kind of first day of presentations and stuff. And we mentioned it was kind of strange that it was on a Friday. I think pretty late on a Friday. I think it's 5 p.m. Eastern time, but I'll have to look again. I think the date was June 17th. But we promptly started wondering, where is everyone else going to fall into place? And, does that mean you're going to have shows and announcements and stuff over the weekend? And it turns out that at least partially it looks like that's occurring. Xbox is going on Sunday. PlayStation hasn't made an announcement. So it'll be super interesting to see if people just go right back to doing what they had always historically done, because it used to be E3 used to start on Tuesday technically. And so a lot of your big platform owners and stuff would go on Sunday, and they would actually get their announcements and stuff out 2 days before. And that would be the thing everybody would watch, right, and listen to and pay attention to and be talking about. And then I want to say Nintendo, and so typically either Xbox or Sony would go first on Sunday, and then the other one would go Sunday afternoon, or maybe either late afternoon / early evening. And then Nintendo would typically go on Monday, and then one of the big third-party publishers, I think typically EA, would go Monday afternoon. And then the show technically would officially start on Tuesday, and that's when we say the show, that we mean like the actual exhibition in the hall with all the booths and whatnot, and all of the journalists, would have their, behind closed doors sessions and things like that, and then it would open up to the general public, typically later on. So when this whole thing went down on Friday, we were wondering, well, where and when is everyone else going to fall in line? And lo and behold, Microsoft is going on Sunday. Ubisoft is going on Monday, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And so, well, I guess it can't be June 17th then, because the Ubisoft date is June 12th. So it's actually June 7th, I guess, must be the date for when the Summer Game Fest presentation is going on. And that leaves out, a few notables that we're still curious about, kind of the PC game show. I'm always interested to know when that's going to go. We know Ubisoft's date now, so we'll be interesting to hear, when EA is going to go. But like I said, it'll be kind of curious if what everybody does is align right back up to the old E3 structure. and that's what's going to happen. It's not clear to me if Summer Games Fest. I know the big announcement and show is on Friday, but it's unclear to me if they'll have additional stuff going into the week. Keighley is really pretty good about putting out a matrix of calendar events and a schedule of what's going on for all the vendors that are technically part of Summer Game Fest, although many vendors will have sessions and events that are not technically part of Summer Games Fest, but they will overlap the same time period. And typically your big outlets like GameSpot and IGN, Games Radar and stuff will kind of synthesize and put all of those together, and we'll put out a chart so everybody's aware. But anything out of this that came up that caught your eye, Tal?
No, I mean, you got the rumors of that, like you mentioned, the next Gears of War game possibly being shown along with Call of Duty, which I have big interest in, since it should be Treyarch, and I think that's been the rumor now. It's what was it, Vietnam or something that's supposed to be?
It's supposed to be Black Ops Desert War. That's right. I think
Desert War, okay.
or maybe Gulf War, but it's supposed to be. I'm not exactly sure what time period it is, so I don't know if it's going to be the first Gulf War or the second, or if it's going to be the post 9/11 9/11 time period of operations in Afghanistan. So I'm not sure exactly which of those time periods you're going to focus on.
Yeah, so I'm definitely interested in that one, because I'll probably jump back into Call of Duty after a few games absence since the last Black Ops Cold War. So definitely jump into those. And then if they show any more of the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, that'd be interesting too. And even some Microsoft, the Flight Simulator, that'd be kind of cool, because it looks like you can do. Well, they already announced they'll have like jobs that you can actually do within the game. Well, this time being a game, I guess, because you can still call it a game, I suppose. The current Flight Simulator, but that looked kind of cool too.
Well, what I would hope is that there would be updates at least on half of everything that they announced at the showcase last year. Again, to kind of keep that messaging and the marketing consistent. That's one of the things that I feel like Xbox has not been executing on well here in this generation. The big thing I'd like to also see the loop closed on is Matt Booty indicated that they were expecting 10 major releases this year in the business update back in February, and I would hope that kind of road path would be laid out. And we've talked about and mentioned that they have announced lots of games, but nothing that lines up as to what, for me at least, what those 10 games are coming out in 2024. I think we know 4 of them, maybe 5. But then again, I lean on the reference was major games. So to me, something like Towerborn doesn't count. That's not to me a major game. But we'll just have to see what comes out. I too am also looking forward to what's gonna be mentioned about Call of Duty. I'm also particularly interested in I can't remember the creative director behind BioShock right now, right off the top of my head, of old Irrational Games. Who's
Ken Levine?
Yes, yeah. So Ken Levine's new game that is very kind of BioShock reminiscent, as well as the one that looks very much like it mentions that it's team members from the old what was the name of that game? Arcanum of Magic Obscura. There's a game that former members of that team are now part of a studio that is being worked on. So I'm kind of curious about those updates as well. And I think the one that takes, again, I didn't make a list of these things right off the top of my head, so I don't know the titles right off the top of my head, but the one that takes place like in the Bayou and is like oriented around like voodoo lore, that seemed to be a particularly popular one as well. So, it'd be interesting to see if they provide updates on all of those. Some other minor news tidbits, which we're not going to go into, but this article also mentions that Kareem Chowdhury, who was, I can't remember exactly what, but I think he was a technical head of things like cloud implementation and some other things, who has been at Microsoft for 26 years, also announced last week that he is leaving the company. And as you mentioned, we also had the news that, not the news, but the rumor that the next Gears of War would be making an appearance. So be fun times. It's good. It's nice to hear about the summer kind of lining up. I already hate Summer Games Fest because I'm trying to pull together a huge rundown of kind of the current state of the Ubisoft portfolio, including, earnings and releases and Metacritic scores and all that type of things. It's taking me forever, and I'm like super aggravated. Because here we go again with, everybody, from big platform owners to mom and pop shops trying to keep, put the whole picture together. So speaking of Ubisoft, Tao, you wanted to talk about Ubisoft's planned show as well.
Yeah, so will actually be part of the Summer Games Fest, and they're going to have their Ubisoft Forward on June 10th. So just a day or two. See, what was that, 9? So that Monday they'll be doing theirs. So Summer Games Fest, like you mentioned, was on the 7th. They're also doing, I guess, a showcase for Day of the Devs, which has, it's kind of like their indie showcase. Kind of a conference showcase for all the indie devs. That is following the just the regular Summer Games Fest on the 7th. So, and then the next day we'll have the Ubisoft so far. So that's all we know as far as Summer Game Fest. If there's any other companies that'll be doing anything, we haven't heard of anything yet. So they didn't really go into any details of what they're going to show yet. And this was an article that I saw from Game Industry Biz, which I actually got from from Ubisoft's X account, which is kind of where they announced it. But more than likely, we'll probably see like Assassin's Creed. We'll probably see, I'm sure, updates on Rainbow Six Siege, and I always forget that the melee combat game, For Honor, stuff like that. Maybe because supposedly the what is it? I'm blanking on games now today too. What was the recent game they just released a couple months ago? Prince of Persia. So the Prince of Persia reboot. Yeah. So I know that's supposedly still in the works. So maybe we'll get something on there. But other than that,
the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown came out. That came out in end of January, early February, I think.
Right.
So they may announce some DLC content oriented around that. Yeah.
So we'll have to see. Other than that, I mean, we really haven't seen or heard about anything else from Ubisoft coming up. I mean, obviously, you got the what is it? The one that's been in development for years now.
XDefiant.
XDefiant 2, yeah. I think. Oh man, I was gonna try to look up that article too. There was something about XDefiant. I think maybe they're gonna do another beta or something, or some kind of test.
Yeah, so they did a beta in December. So that the game has been delayed to this year. There were beliefs that it was going to be kind of the first half of this year. They did a beta in December, and then also recently announced that I think they were going to do another beta, or maybe they just did another beta in the March timeframe. But at any rate, the word of it was kind of the same as last time. The beta tells them that they have more work to do, so they're going to still hold off. But it's possible that this game could also roll out kind of in May. So, I mean, it's interesting. Their portfolio is kind of all over the place, and I won't go into a ton of detail because, again, I'm trying to pull this together for, a more dedicated, treatment of it. But, I felt Ubisoft show was the best show from Summer Game Fest from last year. But when you look at the results kind of out of that show, there were some hits and some misses and some delays, and things of that nature. So, I anticipate, but also some really good ones, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. And then you have the XDefiant, which has kind of left us with more questions than we got answers out of last, their last summer presentation. So it's just, it's kind of tough to tell. And by the same token, they gave Skull and Bones a treatment last year with that kind of, that folk band, kind of covering their song over it. And even then people were predicted, like that game's never coming out. Well, that game did come out, and it actually came out, and it actually charted in NPD, at least for the first month on the street. Again, no indication of what its longevity will be, or, if it'll retain any kind of a player base. So, but it's interesting, and hopefully, like you said, Assassin's Creed, and of course they, gave a treatment to Assassin's Creed Mirage last year, and that actually did come out on time. So it'll be interesting. We'll see how it goes. I am just excited for it as I was last year. It'll just be a little more tempered this year, probably, understanding that, probably 50% of what they announce will actually come out and come out on time and be good.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, I forgot the big one, Star Wars Outlaws. That's their big game for, I believe, this year. That's supposed to come out this year. So probably see a lot more than that, hopefully. But yeah, I was going to mention something now. I can't remember. But yeah, so that's June 10th. So we'll have to wait and see what we get out of that one.
All right. Second story in the rundown is over on VG 24/7. Whatever Baldur's Gate 3 dev Larian ends up doing next, it will probably be in early access too. The article reads, Baldur's Gate 3 dev Larian definitely isn't making a sequel, but whatever its next game is, it will definitely go down the early access route. Last month, many Baldur's Gate 3 fans across the world likely shed a tear when Larian CEO Sven Vincke said that the studio has no plans to make a sequel or even any expansions. Vincke shared that Larian will be moving on to something else, leaving the Baldur's Gate IP in the hands of its owners, Wizards of the Coast, to do something else with. Considering the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 is still regularly getting updates, and the full release isn't even a year old yet, it's unlikely we'll see what's next for Larian for a while yet. But in a recent interview with GameFile, Larian's head of publishing, Michael Dowse, did talk about release plans for the studio's follow-up. So this was a further on interview conducted with, as the article says, Michael Dowse. But in it, what he talks about, is that basically, for them in their way forward with the type of game that they release, and I think I've mentioned a few times on this show and other places, I've played, many, or if not most of the games in the Larian current portfolio over the years, including its various, iterations of Divinity. And yeah, I mean, he basically says, that for them, early access is kind of the business model now. And he talks about it being the only way to do it. But just, indicates that signal and telemetry and feedback and all those things they get back from the fans is the thing that most helps them, shaping their game, and kind of finalizing it and making sure that it is something, that fans want. So we don't know what it is, but, here we have kind of, their head of publishing saying, whatever we do, it is highly likely that it's going to be early access. Tao, does that interest you? Have you had a chance to play Baldur's Gate 3 now that it's on Xbox?
No, it's since it's a turn-based game, I'll probably never play it, since it's probably never going to become Game Pass, as he noted not too long ago, I believe, the same person. So yeah, I'm not big on the turn-based type of to gameplay, so probably not. It did look interesting when I first was looking at, before I even knew it was turn-based, but then when I found that, I was like, I think I mentioned before, like, even if Marvel couldn't, and Star Wars, if those two games couldn't pull me in, I was just like, I don't know if something like this would either. With, not to say I know an IP has to do anything like that, but they've pulled me into other type of games before, so the genres I might not have otherwise kind of tried out, but, or just any kind of, like, familiar IP. But I don't know if I quite agree with him saying, early access is the way to go. Like, I'm sure as a way you can do it, but there's plenty of people out there, or plenty of companies out there, who can more or less release a game without having to go into early access. I mean, it's well,
he was saying for them. He's saying for the type of game that they do, given, and I think I read it as, given a game's complexity and the number of systems, and where there's a dependency on, something that they, with that, again, that depth of systems to give, feedback to the player, so that they can kind of understand how they're evolving, how their character is evolving in the world, and how to utilize, all the stuff, because it's, it's very much kind of a loot oriented game. And even as I mentioned with Baldur's Gate 3, right, there was a lot of, there's at times there were kind of too much stuff. Like, it was very overwhelming. And in fact, I mean, as I asked you, if you played on Xbox, I would never imagine, playing this game on console. I mean, I don't even like it on Steam Deck, because, the way you interact with the menu becomes like a radial wheel. And it is, in my opinion, it is not fun. So, just because, again, it's got dozens upon dozens upon dozens of wheels, dials, switches you can flip, and it doesn't. The way it lays out on console and on Steam Deck isn't really to my personal liking, but I think that's what the way I read it is what he said. It's it's not. He's not saying that that's for everyone. He's saying that that's for them and the type of game that they put together.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and our last story, Yoshi P. This story over on VG247. Yoshi P isn't interested in a Final Fantasy Tactics version 16, but he does think it's about time the spinoff got a new entry. So the article says it's been a long while since a new Final Fantasy Tactics game was released. While the spin-off games are a fan favorite, only a handful of titles with the Tactics subtitle were ever released. Though those that are fans of the games have a lot of love to give them. Interestingly enough, Yoshi P recently shared in an interview with Gamer that he would be interested in seeing a new one too. When asked about using Final Fantasy 16 as the base for a new Tactics game, Yoshida Rising Tide DLC director Takeyu Kujiraoka, again, I know if Swiss is listening, I'm sure he was correct me on my poor Japanese, and localization director Michael Christopher Koji Fox, all apparently laughed and agreed that its scale might not be the best way to go about it. What would we even call it? Fox laughed. Final Fantasy 16 Tactics? That's a lot. So what it sounds like to me is that there have been internal discussions about, the notion of, should they do a Final Fantasy Tactics? If they did, kind of what it would look like, what past IP, what past characters would it incorporate maybe? And so, Square Enix has a very convoluted lore, DNA of lore behind it, with each of the Final Fantasy games essentially being something different. And so, deciding exactly how about going about doing, whatever the next thing is, that will probably be, one of the tough creative choices out of the gate is, what team of characters from which branch of Final Fantasy do we incorporate? But it's good to hear that they're working on it. Final Fantasy Tactics, I didn't spend as much time playing it as I should have, but what I did play of it is absolutely, one of my favorite, tactical RPGs. So have you played a lot of tactical RPGs or anything like Final Fantasy Tactics?
I've tried a few, here and there, but not too many.
Right, and of course they're turn-based. So
they're that's one of the reasons they're turn-based. What was the? There was one, I guess, that I kind of a little bit I got into was like the what was it, the Fire Emblem mobile game that they had released? It was kind of like that. So kind of got into that for a little bit, but then I just fell off of it once again because of the turn-based kind of turned me off. But I know a lot of people love this series. I always the one Discord I'm on, they're always clamoring about it, and I think there was one on the one of the Nintendo systems that they always want to have them bring to the online store. So, but I don't think they've announced anything yet. So, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to bring up one of the comments in the chat, and I've got two mice to different systems, so I picked the wrong one. But thanks so much for Warwana coming through as well. We appreciate you. So yeah, that's all we have for news. I think this is just one of those weeks where there's a ton of conversation going on, but this is E2KG, and we cover news. We don't cover conjecture and speculation and a ton of rumors. We also don't cover, Twitter reactions because, as I always insist, Twitter reactions are not actual gaming industry news. It's just what people are upset about. That's not what we cover on the show. So, pretty light week as far as like actual tangible news. And I know often when even we say that, we wind up looking at the news feed and going, oh no, actually a lot of things did happen this week. So we're going to go ahead and proceed on to we're going to go ahead and proceed on to segment 3, where we're going to talk about the cleanup for what we've been playing. I'll lead the segment off. And so one of the things I've been playing is I got some time to, and unfortunately, there's not a ton more to report. Of course, we all went on spring break. Got back and did a show Tuesday night. And so, we've had a shorter turnaround, from our out of sync session to this one. But Warren does ask a question. Satya did a comment a while ago that he feels that they pulled from mobile too soon. Do you think Microsoft would ever attempt to return? I don't. I did see that comment. It was an interview that he did. And I think it was on like one of the anniversaries of him becoming CEO. And he was asked if he had any regrets, and he mentioned that one of his biggest regrets was that not sticking with Windows Phone. Brap, has been saying something I think that is very poignant. He's been saying, "Well, we'll never say never." The gaming discussion is very opinionated, and we're all very assertive about what our perspectives are. I personally don't think so, because when they went down the path of Windows Mobile, they spent a ton of money, billions of dollars, to acquire Nokia. And they spent a lot of money, trying to get their phones into Verizon, et cetera. I don't think that, and I think trying to do that again with the U.S. carriers, I just think that they're very reluctant right now to do much outside. I mean, you see in the U.S., and I think, War, you've seen me mention it on Twitter more than one times, more than once. So, I am a phone guy. I was a mobile tech reviewer for, 8 years, and still kind of live that lifestyle, using several different handsets, and kind of, writing up reports about them. I think my belief is that their investors and their board would be very reluctant to hear that about a new opportunity, or a new investment ask to spend, millions of dollars, billions of dollars going down that path again, when it already proved once not to be fruitful. I think maybe one way they could do it is if they were going to do something oriented around Surface, and that the hook to it would be AI. So if they figured out something to do with AI, because remember the Snapdragon Gen, X platform, meaning, Snapdragon Gen 1, 2, and 3, or 2 and 3 platforms. And I think that's the labeling they'll be applying to that chipset going forward, where variants of it have an NPU. So the ones that they put in the Surface tablets, the Surface 2-in-1s, right? The variant of the Microsoft Surface that runs on ARM, uses a Qualcomm chipset that does include an NPU. And so if they had some AI hook that would be a huge product differentiator for a Surface phone, I don't necessarily think that they wouldn't, but I don't know that they would go so far as to do their own operating system. I think they would do something with Android. The question this has always brought up for me is this whole notion that Microsoft has mentioned that part of their gaming strategy is going to be to open up their own app store and put Game Pass in that, and have that be the way. Like that's a great idea, but right now today, Apple is getting away with tons of stuff that create some very nasty barriers to entry and financial impact of people operating third-party stores. Charging people 50 euro cents for either every app install that you have above 1 million. Give me 1 second, sorry. Or if you're operating your own third-party app store, every app install. And where that rubric is concerned, like an app install includes an app update, right? So if a user does an app install and then receives a version 1 point whatever update, that is yet another install. And so, that those numbers add up, particularly if you're a really big vendor. they've gone down the path of, remember, they have tried to go down the phone path again, and they've had the Surface Duo, and they had 2 iterations of that, which was the closest thing they've had to the old idea of Courier, which I was in love with and am still in love with today. But Microsoft OneNote has lost a lot of the shine that it used to have. I mean, that would have been a key critical component of Courier. They've kind of walked away from that idea. So I don't know. I just don't see them going down that phone path again. I would love for them to. I loved Windows Phone. I think you guys have heard me say that. I had, a half dozen Windows Phone handsets. I have the Microsoft Surface Duo, which unfortunately now is just a brick. It's sitting in a box waiting for me to recycle it and take it somewhere because, it never really became performant the way, I'd hoped it would. And the Surface Duo 2 didn't do enough to fix the transgressions of the Surface Duo. So, just going to go through the chat real quick before we go on to segment 3. Warwanis mentions, I do feel they are pulling away from hardware as much as possible. 1 year later, they wrote off Nokia for the amount they paid for it, right? Got rid of Stephen Elop. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm still always going to be, super interested in whatever Microsoft does with a hardware perspective. I had the Surface Band, even the watch, I'd love to see them bring that back, but, we'll have to see. Unfortunately, they've scrapped, the plans for Surface Neo, which was their dual screen laptop that they were going to do, which would have been a super interesting device. So, we'll just have to see how it goes.
I never even heard of that one.
Yeah, so it was a thing that they were working on in the background at the same time that so the plan was they were supposed to do Surface Duo, and then another thing that they were supposed to come out was Surface Neo, and I want to say, I can't remember if Surface Neo, I think Surface Neo, the notion of Surface Neo, and this is another reason I put out a cautionary tale about, I said we don't, on the show we don't address, Twitter reactions, but I know there's a lot of Twitter fervor being whipped up about this notion of a dual boot Xbox, or an Xbox that runs either runs Windows or is a PC that runs the Xbox operating system on a VM. I think there's tons of technical complications with that. I also don't think that the notion of the hypervisor is quite exactly what people think it is. But my cautionary tale is, multiple times, Microsoft has started down the path of trying to make a lightweight version of Windows that is tailored and designed to run on ARM, or tailored and designed to run on, Intel Atom, or tailored and designed to run on some other type of hardware platform other than kind of a big beefy, Core i7 type of processor. If you remember the old category of thing called netbooks that were eventually killed by Chromebooks and tablets, that was one of their objectives. If you remember when they came out with the Surface tablets, that one of the things they were going to do, and Surface tablets, I think, kind of do that to a certain extent. But also remember that one of the complaints about the Surface tablets is that, unfortunately, it seems like everybody who uses Windows is kind of old, and thinks that, hey, when it says Windows, that's supposed to mean that it does everything that Windows does. And so one of their problems with traction has been whenever they do Windows that isn't Windows, they cannot product differentiate and convey and communicate that to people to help them understand, okay, this thing doesn't allow you to go off and install like the same types of apps that you historically could install on Windows. Like it's not going to run Audacity. It's not going to, let you pull down and then the other problem is then you try and convince, so here's a great, for instance, today I watched 2 episodes of The Walking Dead. Where I own The Walking Dead is on Google TV, which was the old Google Play, right, segment of the store, which doesn't really exist. That all has now moved to YouTube. Well, Google does not make a Google TV app for Windows. So when you present, right, Windows to somebody, even the full-blown desktop operating system, and they're not a nerd or a geek, right? That person doesn't understand, why is there not a Google TV app, right? And part of the problem, and this jumps even back over to the phone, is that Microsoft has had is try to convince developers and other members of the big tech six to build apps in the App Store that people can install on Windows, even in this age of UWP and Windows 10, right? So they have multiple problems every single time they try and do this. They try to do this with netbooks. They've tried to do this with Surface. They've tried to do this with Surface Go, and they were trying to do it with Windows Neo, and they have unsuccessfully had to pull out of it like every single time. They just decremented, and they're looking at they're pulling out support for Android apps on Windows, which was a very brief notion that you were going to be able to on top of Windows. And I think they had taken BlueStacks and made a modified version of that. You were going to be able to run your Android apps on Windows, and now they're pulling that out of support. So I don't have a ton of confidence. Not because I don't want it. I would love to write. First of all, I think the notion of a dual boot Xbox for the mainstream consumer is a historically bad experience. You look back at the history of consumer electronics, and you look at people who tried to go down that path, and that has resulted in bad experiences for people. That's something that's only for nerds, and maybe that's the only remaining market, segment for Microsoft to really target, and so maybe that will be okay. But I think in general, it's a bad experience. And then I've done a very long write-up on Twitter why that should not be the thing that they do. They should just make it. They should just make it an entry-level PC in a mini ITX case, and label it as Xbox. And then I wrote up, some other things that they should do with it from there. So, like I said, we will see. So, Hero Down Under mentions nothing wrong with Microsoft moving away from first-party hardware as long as they invest in high-quality but profitable software. Hero Down Under also mentions Microsoft can and should, if they are serious, become the most successful third-party publisher. They have the money but lack the commitment. And Warwana says, yeah, dual boot is just to say you have a dual boot setup, right? Right. Even as a big PC enthusiast, right? I've owned Macs and dual booted them through Boot Camp into Windows. I've owned, Linux boxes. I've taken, Windows machines and flipped them to dual booting into, Linux and Windows. And I think there was a brief time when Vista, with Vista, when Vista was just badly supported by drivers from vendors. I'm pretty sure I had things that dual booted between Vista and like Windows and Windows XP. So I don't know. Like I said, we'll just have to see how that goes. Let's go ahead and go on to segment 3. I didn't mind dumpster diving in that because we had a little extra time. Tao, I'm sorry, I kind of took over the mic for that time period. Any thoughts on those topics before we move on?
No, yeah, I think you said pretty much everything. Yeah. I don't see them, and at least not anytime soon, trying to get back into the mobile part of it. So I always did. Also, I always did want a mobile or a Windows phone, but I never did get a chance to get one at the time. So, but we'll see. I think maybe they're probably just looking at apps and especially games and stuff now that they got King. So, and Game Pass getting that on there somehow. So, and I think has also been once again a rumor that they're trying to do something like that on the mobile side.
Sorry, I'm just going to take a minute to adjust some of my cables here. So moving on to segment 3, I'll lead it off. So one of the things I've been doing, like I said, I mentioned we had kind of a short turnaround from the other shows that we've done and going out on spring break. Since I've been back, one of the lighter weight things I've done was I went to play some of the NES on the kind of, I still call it the virtual console, on the Nintendo Switch. And so I have been playing some of the NES via Nintendo Switch Online on the Nintendo Switch OLED. I've been playing that undocked, kind of in easel mode. So, actually not even in easel mode. I actually took it out of the dock and put it on a tablet stand that I have and was playing it with the Pro controller. And 2 games that I checked out were Crystalis and Gradius. So Crystalis is very much a game and I grew up as a big Sega kid. One of my favorite RPGs on the Sega was this game called Aztec Adventure. And Crystalis kind of reminds me a little bit of that. It is surprisingly complex for a little sprite-based, 2D top-down, little RPG. There's a lot that the game doesn't explain to you. It is classically horrible about onboarding. And maybe every game was back then, but I definitely had to go off and look up some wikis about how the heck do you play this game. And finding a wiki for a game that came out like in the 90s is not an easy thing to do these days. So give me 1 second, sorry. Sorry, I drink an energy drink during the show, and that in combination with as congested as I am with allergies, just really screwing my system up. But yeah, it's a really beautiful looking game, even in the modern sense of the word, if you have an appreciation for kind of 2D sprite kind of art. But in this game, you show up. It's got a really convoluted, made up lore, about why you are where you are. But you basically drop down kind of into this cave, into this like subterranean civilization, and you're trying to help them like survive the big evil or whatever. And so you drop into this town, you run around the town, kind of a very kind of monster world kind of fashion, and visit all the villagers who have different shops and things set up, and you can buy things. And one of the villagers gives you your first set of credits. So I was able to buy a sword and kind of a leather vest to act as armor. And then I kind of take off into the wilderness to start searching around. You encounter kind of your first set of monsters. But yeah, it's really neat. I had a good time with it. It's funny. Nintendo Switch Online now or at least the NES part of it kind of pops this thing up that like, hey, we're selling classic NES controllers, and this is the only place you can get them. So would you like to buy them? And so I had to skate by that. I am interested in those, but I'm trying to assess whether or not, I'm going to play enough Nintendo Switch Online, before like the new Switch comes out, and then will those controllers be compatible with the new Switch? And, look, I think we have all heard things that should give us high hopes for the Switch successor, maintaining backwards compatibility to everything that works with the Switch, but there's Nintendo, so I'm going to pump the brakes and hold off on that until I see proof that we have good reason to be as optimistic as we are. The other thing that I've been playing was Gradius, which is kind of like your kind of Defender. I don't want to call it a Defender clone because really I'm not absolutely certain, which came first. But Gradius is very much kind of like a Defender. It's almost, I would actually, I guess, call it maybe a mix between Defender and Galaga. It is side-scrolling left to right. You're in a little, one-person spacecraft. You get power-ups, and that expands on your weaponry. Things come across the screen in waves. It's your basic classic, arcade coin op, eats quarters for breakfast kind of game. So, and as I'm playing it, I'm like, how in the world did we ever play games like this without cheats? But yeah, it's kind of a neat looking. I wouldn't quite give it as much of a nod for kind of the effectiveness of its sprite based artwork as I would for Crystalis. But it's still pretty fun. It's still a pretty good time. Are these games that you've checked out on the NES console at all, Tal?
No, I haven't checked out either of these. Crystalis, probably not, but Gradius maybe. I remember playing that back in the day though, so I might check that out at some point. I was looking at some video and I was like, wait a minute, isn't this Defender? Because there's like a little planet or something that he's going through, at the time. It looked a lot like it, but you kind of have those, I think, like shmups kind of stages too, where there's just like, stuff shooting all around you and at you. So, but yeah, I'd probably check it out at some point. I can't even remember the last game I actually. Oh well, it's probably Dr. Mario. It was the last game I probably played on there with my wife. So, but anything that I've just played by myself, it's probably been a while since I checked out any of those games. So I got to go back in there at some point and kind of revisit some stuff, especially since they released Blast Core, which I remember playing that back in the day. I enjoyed that. Some of the N64 stuff I want to kind of get back into.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I've continued to comment. It's kind of funny as I go back and think about this kind of every single time when this thing first landed. we were all universally skeptical. We were like, oh, first of all, you're really starting this late in the game of the life cycle of the Nintendo Switch, right? This thing is, at that time, we were already talking about, we should be getting a successor sometime soon. Games are having problems. How much longer is this thing going to be around? And we're like, wait a second. Here comes the Nintendo Switch Online. Like, isn't that something you usually do for a platform you're going to be keeping around for a while? But we've since gotten news that kind of, as the platform pushes forward, at least this next iteration, theoretically, you're going to have access to your same, persona that enables your access to the eShop. So that's not supposed to change, and you're supposed to have access to all that content, which means to me that content is they're planning on you being able to play that content on the next platform. And as we mentioned on the show, this is the first time really in modern times that has been done. Typically, what Nintendo has done, every new platform that comes out, they scrag the previous version of the store or the virtual console, and you have to buy all that stuff over again. And if you still want access to the old stuff, you just have to hold on to the old hardware. So it sounds like even with the current economic factors, Nintendo is even, agreeing to do some things that it has historically not done. So, it'll be interesting to see if hopefully if that remains true and, we are able to continue to access all this stuff. But it's a really thoroughly robust kind of dashboard now when you go in there. I mean, when these things first showed up, there were maybe 9 to 13 games when they just showed up. And now I'm pretty sure I'm just kind of guessing this off of, the number of rows that I had to scroll on that page. This time I'm pretty sure there's got to be, easily in excess of 26 or 30 games. So it's and that's the thing that we mentioned. We were like, hey, we would hope that they would add to this over time, but we don't have any guarantees of that, And then the whole structure of if you remember when the Genesis came along, it was, oh well, if you want access to those two things in the GameCube stuff, right, you're gonna have to pay extra. And we were like, well, hold on a second. What exactly? It was a classic example of you buying that SKU of a game that includes the season pass, but there's been no admission to the roadmap of what the season pass includes. So it's nice to see them continually kind of fleshing this service out. In the chat, War mentions, yeah, true, LOL. I tried the Switch cloud streaming and it wasn't too bad. I still have my NES, but I can't play it on my TV. Just need to buy a converter, really. And then also mentions, but even then, Duck Hunt won't work on my TVs. Right. Tao, any other mentions about the Nintendo Switch Online stuff?
No, yeah, I was going to mention that the expansion pass is how they worded it for when the N64 and the Genesis stuff came out, and I think I can't remember. Is the Game Boy part of that, or that might be just part of the regular online?
I think the Game Boy's part of the regular online.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So they're still, actually, the last few months they seem to be kind of releasing stuff a little bit more often than it has, previously. So that's actually kind of nice. I think the last one was just actually a week or two ago was some Game Boy games. I can't remember what they were right now, but Game Boy is one of the blind spots in my Nintendo console timeline, because I never had a Game Boy. It's probably one of the only things. Well, that and the Virtual Boy. Those are the only things I never got. So it's probably for the best I didn't get that. But yeah, I always wanted a Game Boy, but I never got one.
Well, now you can play the virtual Game Boy on your Nintendo Switch to see what all the hubbub was about. But I mean, it's nice that they finally solved that problem, right? And they have an approach and a means for you to access the content. So yeah, just one of the things I'm chalking up to, I need to, spend some more time playing that, while I have access to it. Yeah. The second thing that I've been playing is the thing that I claimed that I was not going to be playing last week, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. So in the trials and travails of the troubleshooting and everything that I had been exposed to, one of the things that I did after the podcast, I think maybe even that night, I was super, super late. And actually, I'd mentioned to you guys that I was going to, go back to kind of my own algorithm for, generating my playlist. And what I'd come up with was that I was going to go back and try and play all of the old Need for Speed games, which all along the way I've played the vast majority of them, but I was going to make some dedicated time to kind of playing through the franchise. And so it turns out that I actually decided I was going to use that same box with the RTX 4080 in it and the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. So I went to that box. I paid for Need for Speed Heat because since I'm allowing my Game Pass subscription to lapse, that turns out that was actually where I had been playing Need for Speed Heat before, but now I wasn't going to have access to it. And I went into the game and I immediately started having problems. I could not get through, a night of 3 consecutive races without the game crashing on me. And I was like, okay, so now this game is crashing too, and Call of Duty is crashing. And I went and looked at, and it was crashing in a way that was in some cases similar to what I'd seen on Call of Duty, but also very different. And I came across some writings of, people who had been having problems, who had historically had problems with Need for Speed Heat, and people who had eventually gone to like the EA app to try and play it that way, and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I'm going to troubleshoot Need for Speed Heat, but now because I'm seeing the symptoms across 2 games, I'm going to use Call of Duty kind of as a litmus test and bounce them off of each other. And I'm going to have to come off this notion that it's been a problem that the game has been creating and consider whether or not it's my hardware. So through multiple hours of troubleshooting, I finally got down to the point where, and looking at like precision boost override and the motherboard and blah, 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 I finally said, wait a second. One of the things that's super weird with the Call of Duty symptoms was that my frame rate on that box was seeming to be capped at 138 frames per second. Well, the monitor I use over there is a 144 hertz monitor. I'm like, why is it capping at 138? And I was like, oh, by the way, I've looked up, capped at certain frame rates. I have not specifically looked up capped at 138. I'm like, that's got to be a very hyper-specific symptom that people have seen. So finally, I went off and looked at that and saw that that in most of the cases where people were specifically saying they were capped at 138, they had done one of 2 things or both. They had turned off G-Sync if you're on a G-Sync monitor, which I am on a G-Sync monitor we're at that battle station. And then they also mentioned, with slightly less frequency, a lot of people had mentioned that they had turned off NVIDIA Reflex. And so we've seen a few kind of weird cases of things like Starfield and some other games where you turn on an advanced NVIDIA technology or technique methodology, and you actually get worse performance. So I was like, look, between all the driver updates, and I had regressed drivers and brought drivers, I had just run the full gamut. So I did those 2 things. I disabled G-Sync at the monitor. I turned off NVIDIA Reflex within Call of Duty, and voila, everything started running and performing again. And I was, just capped at 144 frames per second, with no frame rate dips, just locked in as it had always been. So I think it was a matter of there were several root causes going on that yielded, a set of common symptoms, under 2 different games even. So I don't necessarily know that I ever found the smoking gun of like what the one thing was that was wrong. But I'm also at the point now where I'm like, okay, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think Warwana's joking, but he says the thing that so many gamers say, or even nerds just in general say, like when you say you haven't seen a movie, they're like, what? You haven't seen blah, blah. He's like, what? You never had a Game Boy? So, but this correcting itself did allow me to get into season 3 of Call of Duty. And one of the things that I wrote today is, Sledgehammer and the Call of Duty franchise, they have delivered in a way that the gaming media would have led you to believe wasn't possible or feasible with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Season 3 is in the 5 years since I've been back, since the Modern Warfare reboot. Season 3 is the most, I wouldn't necessarily say polished, but the most fun that I've had at the launch of any seasonal content with Call of Duty. It is the most robust map rotation they've ever had. It is the best collection of weapons and attachments that they've ever had. skins now are completely crazy, and it is definitely like right upon the cusp where I definitely need to start referring to Call of Duty as a metaverse type of game that is right up there with Fortnite. So I'm super impressed by what's going on with Call of Duty. And of course, Raven has now peeled off. They've announced that they've pretty much completed their work with any zombies content and is converting the remainder of their team over to a full court press. Treyarch. Treyarch mentioned that they are done, providing support for the zombies mode, and they are now on a full court press to wrap things up on Call of Duty Gulf War, as we mentioned earlier in the show, coming out this fall. So, yeah, I'm super happy with the game right now. One of the most interesting modes that it has is there is a LTM called Horde Town or Horde Point. Sorry, and this is a mix between Hardpoint and zombies, and so your team has to go around the map and lock down the Hardpoint, but there's a counter, there's a timer that's going off on that is very much kind of like almost like the Left 4 Dead kind of timer, and at a certain point of time of the first team capturing the Hardpoint, a wave of zombies starts. And they spawn at different parts of the map, and they all start making their way to the hard point. And in these waves of zombies, there's a specific wave where elites are spawned. And I have emptied a full assault rifle clip as well as a full handgun clip, this is times when my loadout consists of a 50 cal handgun, and not been able to take down an elite. So I have to then run away far enough until I can reload. So it is a super kind of scary enemy that your team faces on the Horde Point, to say nothing of the fact that there are other actual enemy human combatants on board on this map as well. So it is very much a mixture of kind of like Gambit in Destiny 2, where, my only point being it is PvE and PvP at the same time. It is, I'm sure, not everybody's cup of tea. Some people aren't going to enjoy it. It's definitely an acquired taste. Some of the maps do some weird things, like the Quarry map, which I love the Quarry map in general, but the Horde Point version of the Quarry map kind of does this the floor is lava kind of thing, where it doesn't cause any damage, but there's just the whole ground surface on the game is full of red splotches, which just makes people incredibly difficult to see. And one of the things that's great about Quarry is it has tons of verticality to it, so you can get up really high and have really good shooting lines of sight down to people transiting, across the bottom of the Quarry. But in this mode, I literally can't see people. So, and when they're down on the ground level, but it is a ton of fun. I think the most fun I had with that mode was when I played on Terminal. But I think I played on one other map as well that was also pretty fun. I just didn't particularly care for the Quarry one. So, Bravo Zulu to Sledgehammer, keep it up, guys. I know you're the most undersung of the three, but I think Call of Duty is in the best place that I've seen it in, over the last 5 years. All right, Tal, any comments on either Call of Duty or Nintendo Switch Online?
No, I always did enjoy Sledgehammer's multiplayer on the other games that they had made. So, going back to, did you play the story mode in Modern Warfare 3 at all?
I did not. No.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering because back in one of the stories where we had talked about earlier, they were saying how the new one, the Black Ops Gulf War, which is probably what it's going to be, is probably going to have the open world missions, and I was just wondering how that actually works, what they meant by that exactly.
I'm not sure, but Treyarch is the one who's the most notorious for not including a single player campaign in their game at all. So I would expect the same. It sounds like they're going to include maybe some single player kind of missions, but not necessarily do what we historically or traditionally think of as a campaign. And that wouldn't surprise. I'm sure that there will be an outcry from the social media, but I'm going to be like, guys, this is what Treyarch does every time. I mean, this is a Black Ops game. So in fact, Black Ops Cold War was actually right an anomaly, because normally you don't get a big story with Black Ops. but Black Ops Cold War, you did, and I actually think it was like one of the better stories. Except that, again, I don't particularly care for psychedelic, drug trippy levels. And it had one in there actually close to the end. So, but no, I'm not sure, and I didn't play the single player campaign this one, so I by the same thing, I also didn't get all wrapped up in all the negative commentary around the single player campaign. I'm like, I hate to tell you, but not a lot of people buy Call of Duty for the single player campaign anymore. And I had my 8 years where I didn't play Call of Duty, but I would go and buy like the discounted copy like 6, 8, 9 months after it had come out. I think Swiss does that a lot, just to play the single player campaign to where I wouldn't feel bad about the money that I'd spent because it was less money for a shorter campaign, but at the end of the day, I mean that gets worked on and put in there, and there's not a ton of upside for the company from that perspective because not a ton of people buy the game for that single player campaign.
Yeah, I used to actually go through the single player, at least start it and maybe get like halfway through it. Most of the time, beat it before I even jumped into multiplayer because it was it's super short, like 8 hours maybe at the most. And I think that's a lot of people kind of dog on it sometimes, the shortness. But it's like, I mean, it's a Call of Duty game. Like it's not going to be Skyrim or Baldur's Gate or anything like that. I mean, you're going to expect something short. And then I think around maybe the original Modern Warfare 2. I think I stopped. I just totally stopped. Like I was just doing the multiplayer after that. So I'm one of those guys now.
So War want to ask in the chat, did you try Call of Duty Warzone Mobile? War, I have not. Unfortunately, I do have it loaded on both of my tablets, but I just haven't had a time to go and try it out. Word on the street was that it was in early performance numbers, it was not doing as well as Call of Duty Mobile was doing. So it's a wait and see kind of how that goes. War mentions, I did play through Modern Warfare 3 campaign, and it wasn't the greatest, but hardly a reason to not buy it when most of your time is spent in multiplayer modes. Yep. And Tal, you want to go ahead and take us out with your rundown of the last game that you've been playing?
Yeah, so I had mentioned, I shouldn't say mentioned, I had started No Man's Sky again last week. Unfortunately, I had originally had bought it on the Xbox, so they didn't have the update ready at that point, but they did drop it this past Tuesday, I believe. Actually, I think I mentioned that on the last show. So I was able to play a little bit, not as much as I would have liked. So I didn't get to see too much of the new stuff, or at least as the ship customization. I haven't started doing any of that stuff yet. But as far as like the other big thing was they kind of redid all the space stations in the game. So yeah, I mean they do look like really nice now. Like before, they're kind of all kind of either like a circle or sometimes a square or a diamond shaped for the most part, and maybe have like a variation in color. But now it's like they're like really detailed and really weird shapes and just whatever you can think of. Like they probably have a shape for it, and I haven't even seen I probably only saw like half a dozen of them maybe. So. And the inside, I thought the insides were supposed to be different too, but they look pretty much the same on the inside, or at least the layout. There's a few differences, like maybe some crates or something that are not there or that are there, depending on where you are. But I guess that kind of makes sense because you don't want to like have people looking for, all the different, like the guild people and the shops and stuff, if it's totally configured different each time. So, or maybe they're going to do something else down the road, but it still looks really nice. It's like, it almost looks, it's a little bit more wide open too when you go in there, which is kind of nice. So if you ever went into back one of the pirate space stations, that was always kind of like an open area. It wasn't like kind of enclosed like the other ones were, and kind of sectioned off like the regular ones are. So now that's pretty much how the regular ones are now. It's just kind of big open space, and there's like a little space in the middle with all the vendors and the guild people and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of nice. So it looks really, like I said, it looks really nice. And I've been playing on PC, but I'm still going through my Game Pass. So obviously that's how I got it. And the week before that, I had started playing just on my Xbox Series X. And man, the game really looks nice on PC. And it looks nice on the Xbox Series X, but man, I could just see a lot more detail and stuff like in the buildings and even on the planet and stuff. So it just looks really nice on the PC. So I've been doing that. I thought I could just jump into the customization, but you have to kind of go look around. You still have to go search for like kind of abandoned or destroyed ships and kind of scavenge for parts and stuff like that. So I didn't have any parts on me anymore because I usually just sell that stuff off. So I have to go back and do that. But when I was going to start doing that, I realized my money was starting to get kind of low. So now I'm trying to build my money up first before I start doing any of that. And I don't know if it costs money to do any of the customization, but just in case, I'm going to kind of start getting all that my money back up. So what I'm doing now is if you go and look for the what do they call it? The Sentinel ships. Those are like pretty big money when you go to sell them. Even like the lower tiered ones, like the C class and the B class. So I've been kind of doing that now, just trying to build up my cash again. So I'm going to do that, and then because I think the Sentinel ships they're separate from the regular ships you find. You can't really scavenge those, I guess, or they don't give you the same kind of parts. So once I finish with that, then I'll start doing like the regular, looking for ships and stuff like that and scavenging them, and then I can go and kind of customize stuff. I think it kind of looks like you can just build one like in total. Like I think you can modify the ones you have, but I think you can just totally build a new ship. So I might try that at some point too, and just kind of do that. So just kind of messing around with that. So that'll kind of leading up into what I'm doing next. I'll probably jump more into No Man's Sky, and also I kind of want to go back into Pal World because they had a big update this past week also. So I want to kind of check out some of the stuff they did in that game too. So I suggest if you haven't been in No Man's Sky for a while, jump back into it because there's a lot of good stuff in there right now.
Yep, and by the same token, I have no idea exactly what I'm going to be doing next other than more Call of Duty, but I'm sure I'll find some other things to mix in there as well. But I am, as of today, not sure what that is. Again, having just kind of coming out of the throes of major shooting to see what was going on. So, but whatever it is, I'm sure it will be something video game related. So we'll be able to report on that next week. And next week, DBQ Hams will have the ball as your primary co-host, and Tao and I will be in chairs 2 and 3 to back him up. So, Tao, anything else that you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, thanks for Wana and Hero Down Under for stopping by. Great discussion there.
Agreed. Thank you so much, guys, for coming through. We appreciate you. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk to us about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been GameLogIQ from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube. Here with my stalwart partner in crime, Tao Master. For anybody who, for you guys who were here in the live chat, again, Warawana and Hero Down Under, we appreciate you coming through. For anybody who chooses to watch the archive version of this podcast on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly, on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever we post new content. We will be back Sunday night, same bat time, same bat channel, 8:45 p.m.-ish EDT. So until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.